guys, thanks for coming to Storefront Ottawa. Please help me welcome Tracey Clark. Tracey's been running Bridgehead since 2000. She's the CEO and president, and we're going to find out more about
running after.
So we're going to find out more about why you started it and all that kind of great stuff. So let's grab a seat. So I hope you guys can hear us and see us. We're going to save all the questions to the end, but basically I'd like to have you share a bit of where you're from. Where did you grow up, and did it have any bearing on the person you are today?
This is more personal than I thought it was going to be. Well, I was born in Windsor, Ontario, Car City. My dad was a plant supervisor there before we moved, but we moved around. We moved 9 times before I was 11 years of age, all within southern Ontario. So I'm kind of a southern Ontario girl. But we moved here to Ottawa when I was 11. Loved it. Mm-hmm. Went away for university. And one of the dilemmas that people often get is you often feel weird being in the same city where you grew up. Should I move on? But in fact, I love it. Ottawa's a great place to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So what was your family life like? Were your parents or grandparents entrepreneurial? Where'd you get the bug to become an entrepreneur?
Like most entrepreneurs, it was a complete accident. My mom was a homemaker. She was with us and did some work out of the home later on. She was actually an assessor with the Canadian Revenue Agency for a while. So I like to think that my skill with numbers probably came from her more than my dad. Yeah. My dad did a lot of different things. He taught university and college, as I say, worked at Chrysler's, but then moved here as an economist with transport, and then was a politician regionally for many, many years, and just recently lost his seat in Rideau Rockcliffe. But wow. That's okay.
That's okay.
I didn't want him to run.
It's time for something else.
But the entrepreneurial bug, the one entrepreneur back in our family was on my mom's side, there were farmers, which all farmers are entrepreneurs. That'll be one of my messages tonight. And then on my dad's side, I had a great-great-grandfather that used to run a candy cart.
Cool.
I never saw that.
You never saw the candy cart?
That's the rumor.
The story was there, okay.
Yeah, the story was there.
So you mentioned that you moved away to study. So I know you did an undergraduate degree in international development. No, was the master's? Oh,
no.
The other way, no.
No.
Okay, well, how about you tell us?
Okay,
What did you study?
I had been a tennis player and went away on a tennis scholarship to North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And my dad had wanted me to do a commerce degree, then do law school, then do a CA. He thought it would be really great if I was going to be a corporate tax lawyer. And I was like, no. So instead, I studied physics and biology, but I realized having to do a lot of cutting into the bellies of white mice that science was not going to be it for me either. So I actually didn't finish my undergraduate degree. I have a partial physics degree that I absolutely will not go back and do and finish, but came back and started working in restaurants. The Ritz restaurants. But over time, I realized that I wanted to go back to school, and so I ended up going back and doing a master's in business administration at Concordia in Montreal.
Okay, awesome. And so how did...
but there was a fellowship in international development management. That's where that one
That's
comes
what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
And so while you were doing your MBA at Concordia, what did you do previously to Bridgehead and in between that or right after school?
Yeah, what did I do? Well, I was working while at school, so I was with the Ritz for 6 years or so, and then going back to school, was very interested in social justice, international development, and in particular solidarity lending and microcredit. I did my master's degree research project on solidarity lending in Bangladesh, and I really wanted to go there on the ground and see how effective that was. And I applied for an Aga Khan Foundation Fellowship and was awarded it and got to go to Bangladesh and work with BRAC You probably know BRAC, Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, the largest international NGO in the world, like massive, you know. And when they talk about a project, you know, well, we're going to do, you know, we're going to do this and it's going to affect 200,000 people at a time. You know, it's just the scale of what they do is absolutely amazing. But that was very eye-opening for me. But I also realized that the charitable side of development didn't feel good. You know, having traveled now to a lot of countries, the entrepreneurial spirit in those countries are sometimes, we're just starting to develop an entrepreneurial culture here in Canada, is how it feels to me. But there, it's everywhere. You know, go to any urban city to, you know, and you see streams of metal workers, or, you know, now in you know, parts of India, you know, the high-tech development that goes on there can rival anywhere. But all to say, there was a real entrepreneurial spirit that was probably inspiring for me, but I also realized that I had some real issues with the charitable model of development, and if anything, I felt that I wanted to still work in that sector, but I wanted it to be on the basis of respectful, dignified trading relationships.
That's really amazing to kind of hear. And so how did you kind of stumble into Bridgehead? What's the story behind it? Why retail and why fair trade coffee? Was it always that vision?
I'm just going to point out that's the bread oven just going through a steam cycle. We're not going to take off anywhere. Well, so there was another little kind of step in between. Came back. I worked in high tech for a while, and then moved into Mountain Equipment Co-op. I worked there for a period, very successful consumer co-op model. And while I was at Mountain Equipment Co-op, I was invited to join the board of the previous incarnation of Bridgehead, and that just started to lead down the path to where we are today.
That's awesome. And so, like, but was retail always a passion of yours, or did Bridgehead, when its previous incarnation, was it focused on fair trade coffee, or is that something that you brought to the table? Yeah,
well, the history of Bridgehead was that it was originally founded in 1981 in Toronto by 2 United Church ministers and 2 Central America Solidarity activists. There was a revolutionary government in place in Nicaragua at the time, the Sandinistas. It's really loud, eh?
Yeah, it's pretty loud.
I wonder why.
It's not good for me.
It's not good for you?
Good,
No?
eh?
Does it take a while, or should we move closer?
Should we move closer?
Probably should.
Yeah, let's do it.
Either way, not noisy.
Okay, so I'll just go through the brief history of Bridgehead. So 1981, revolutionary government in Nicaragua, U.S. government slaps on an embargo. Canadians were always very sympathetic to people that the Americans don't like, right? Like the Cubans, we love them, the Americans don't like them, that kind of thing. So there were activists in Toronto who said, gosh, they were very concerned about the coffee farmers in the northern part of Nicaragua. And so they 2 of them were Anglophiles, Brits, who...
If you want to sit, I guess.
No, it's better for us if we stand up, actually. Like, it's better for our bodies if we stand up. We sit too much.
Yeah,
Did you know that?
I have a standing desk at work, so I know.
Cool. I knew you'd be cool. Yeah. Anyway, these activists went down to Nicaragua, met some farmers, and said, we want to buy your coffee. Yeah. And they purchased the coffee under fair trade terms, brought it back, had it toll roasted by Mother Parkers in southern Ontario, and then distributed it mostly at churches, at fellowship meetings, that kind of thing. And then for 3 or 4 years, that's how it operated. And in 1984, this is going back a long time ago, they approached Oxfam Canada, an international development agency, and said, could you take on this Bridgehead project? And Oxfam did. But then it morphed into focusing on handicrafts. So it always had coffee at its core, but it became more of a handicraft business. And that operated as a mail order catalog in 3 stores, Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, till about 1998. And it was really in trouble. It actually went through a bankruptcy. And I tried to save it. And this is the other side of that. In the year 2000, we had been told to wind everything up. And I really didn't want to see another alternative trading organization fail. There had been some failures in other parts of the world anyway, so we put in an offer for the rights to the name and said we want to return Bridgehead to its roots in fair trade coffee, but we felt that the real gap in the marketplace at that time was they're not having fair trade coffee in the cup. So the most important thing for us was let's get it up in the cup and let's offer it in a way that we can compete against the nationals and the international chains by putting it in the cup. So as a demonstration business, never a desire to be the biggest, as you can tell. So.
That's awesome.
Phew, that's good.
So what's that process like? How do you go about buying trademarks from a company in Toronto and then moving it to Ottawa and building a community around that?
Yeah, it was already here in Ottawa. It had originally founded in Toronto, but Oxfam had moved it here because that's where their head office was. Well, actually, when Bridgehead was old Bridgehead was kind of dissolved, we were tasked with selling components of the business, and we were able to sell some components, but the catalog business that existed at the time, this is kind of pre-internet, pre-Amazon, that's where the trademark went. And the catalog business really wasn't profitable at all, and we really couldn't find a buyer for it. And so it was either that the trademark was going to be retired, and that's we had a small cooling off period, but we'd put in an offer for the rights to the name. And then there was a trademark that Bridgehead had, Gifts That Give Twice, and that trademark we actually transferred to 10,000 Villages, which is a Canadian and American fair trade handicraft organization.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so how did you guys go about reestablishing the brand of Bridgehead here in Ottawa and building a community around it? What were the core values that you really wanted to bring to the organization or the business?
That's a good question. Right away, we knew that the folks that got involved, there was one former manager of Old Bridgehead, so there were 13 Old Bridgehead managers, and when I went to them with the idea, guys, I think we should just totally pivot the company. Actually, you didn't use the word pivot back then. That's kind of a new word. I really like it, though. We should pivot and put fair trade coffee in the cup and open coffee houses. There was only one manager out of those 13 who said, I think it's a good idea. The other 12 were like, it'll never work, don't do it. And that manager, Pam Fletcher, I want to give her a shout out. She's not here tonight, but she's been with us from before day one and continues to be with us. But we felt it would be a good idea. But how do you do it? You need to build a small team when you start, and you need to have a very strong purpose. You need to know that you're going to work your ass off to get going, and you do need to kind of develop some core values. I don't think we made our value statements. Actually, we were fairly explicit. Even when we hired our first baristas, we developed kind of training. We knew we wanted to support frontline employees through training, so we developed training statements. And those value statements were about wanting to be advocates around fair trade, wanting to have a low environmental footprint, wanting to be seeing ourselves as part of a global community, really being focused on quality and service. I mean, those were all parts of the values.
Absolutely. And so, what do you think some of the most common mistakes other small companies make when they're trying to grow their brand or establish their brand? Do they rush into it, or?
Oh, I think, in food businesses, it's something like 80% of new food businesses will fail within the first 3 years. And, why? Sometimes I think it can be many, many different things. I think we had some, I like to think that luck is where preparation meets opportunity, that there is real no luck, but that's where those things are. But we had some good timing. When we started, Starbucks was not a licensee of fair trade. That was the WTO talks in Seattle when they smashed windows and things. That's when Starbucks said, "Oh gosh, yeah, we better become a fair trade licensee." So so there was some timing in terms of there were other roaster retailers. Roasters of fair trade coffee, but nobody really putting it in the cup in a really forward way. So there was kind of a little teeny first mover piece there, teeny. But the market at the time, the coffee market was at a 37-year low. The year we started the business, coffee prices were running US 65 cents a pound. There were farmers leaving coffee. There were farmers committing suicide. It was really a really bad time for coffee, and it was a bit of a wake-up call for the Specialty Coffee Association, and there was a real move towards quality as a result, because there was a sense of, gosh, we better pay farmers more, not just under fair trade terms, but just generally in the marketplace, we need to pay farmers more if we want a reliable supply of green coffee. And so there were a few factors that were timing. The fact that our first store was beside the MEC was great. 1 out of 5 adults in Ottawa, members of MEC, so they're seeing you. Westboro was the place, that stretch along Richmond Road where our first store was. MEC went into an abandoned grocery store. It was a really decimated area, and now it kind of looks like Bloor Street. So there were a couple of factors that I would say, was it skill? Sure. Yeah. No. Yeah, it was skill. Yeah. No. Careful preparation, meeting opportunity. Yeah. Anyway.
And so now, 14 years later, almost 15 years, Bridgehead has really, developed a bunch of sustainable and socially beneficial, community projects. Can you tell us more about some of the projects you guys have done over the years, not just here in our community, but in communities, internationally?
Sure. One of the things that I'm really proud of is this machine here and the cupping lab over there, and yeah, you start chewing that coffee. At Origin, it's really exciting to meet like-minded growers who are passionate about their coffee and who are focused on quality, because we have this view that quality and differentiation will allow premiums to be paid to growers, and then they will have more sustainable livelihoods. And so, going and meeting with growers and talking about quality and talking about the end, the consumer and their experience around the cup of coffee, it's neat to see that getting linked. Our mission statement is to link consumers with small-scale growers. So it's that talking about the coffee, talking about the quality, talking about the flavors. That's a big part of the program, is going and meeting. There have been several occasions where we've gone to Origin and growers will say to us, "You're the first buyer I've met," right? Because they just don't meet buyers all that often. It is starting to become more regularized, and that's great, because it's that conversation and then that dialogue and that relationship around coffee that's important, over the long term. So just the way we do sourcing, and increasingly how we're looking at sourcing is to try to drill down to the individual farmer and work with co-ops, though, that are willing to keep the lots separate of coffee. So in a lot of co-ops, everybody's beans gets tossed together, their cherries get tossed together. So if you and I are neighbors, and you're really great, you only pick the really ripe cherries, but I'm a little lazy and I put some of the yellow and the green ones there, then our collective price comes down. You kind of get mad at me, and then you might not keep picking great coffee cherries anymore. So there's this problem there. But if you can disaggregate the coffee and then trace those individual lots through, and then provide quality incentives in terms of price, then wow, you got more for your coffee? I'm going to start picking the ripe cherries too, if there is a decent enough differential. And that's been, it's hard to believe that that's an innovative thing in Coffee Origin, but it is. So it's things like that we do. We've invested in mobile cupping labs, interesting fertilization, like boyashi, which is a Japanese way of dealing with how to compost, so you get great metabolic things that happen when they put this boyashi on the coffee plants. Things like that we invest in, and it's always quality-oriented initiatives with quality-oriented co-ops. And then here at home, we do things too. We try to draw attention. One of the things when we meet with potential community partners, we rarely offer cash. That's not what we try to do. But what we try to do is create exposure or provide donations of coffee. We've never been a cash advertising company. We've always felt that we wanted to grow by word of mouth, but we like to draw attention. So one of our most recent fundraising blends was for Hidden Harvest, and that was really exciting. And I hate to say this, Ernst & Young, I need to do, or KPMG, I need to do a little shout out for Ernst & Young because they partnered and also with Hidden Harvest, and that ended up being an almost $10,000. Is it important to them? Yeah, it's small amounts of funds, but they're important. So we do things like that.
Absolutely, and the Eric Carlson blend too, who's right back there.
Yeah, well, the Carlson one is it's great. Last year we raised just over $11,000 for the Boys and Girls Club, homework clubs. We're hoping that we'll raise at least that this year, and hopefully a bit more. But the Carlson one's funny because that's actually. He's providing some exposure, not just for the Boys and Girls Club, but we find we're sort of in his draft, and his draft's pretty big and fast, so it's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what? No, this is a shorter question. So what does 2015 hold for Bridgehead? What are you guys looking forward to do in the next year or the next couple years? Where's it headed?
Yeah, we're really excited about 2015. 2012, when we started this, was a huge year, and we had to kind of recover from that. The balance sheet has to recover from that. Right, guys? Yeah. The KPMG's here. Way to go. Anyways, but what does 2015 hold? We are super excited. This August we brought our bread oven here, and we take the thing that makes bread really great is a lot of time and a lot of water, and also great flours. But we have a grain mill coming, which is really exciting. We have 3 local grain farmers that will be selling us their kernels of various kinds of grains. And because the fact is so I'm actually really pro-gluten. I'm a gluten advocate. I want to go on the record as being pro-gluten. And I also want to go, if there's a great read, I'm gonna shout this out. In the November 3rd issue of the New Yorker, which is their annual food issue, there's a great article by Michael Spector called "Against the Grain," and it debunks all of the gluten myths. And any case, I'm happy to take arrows later, but all to say we're gluten advocates, but gluten's gotten a bad rap in terms of commercial bread production, and the other places that it's used. So our bread lab is meant to be open and transparent, and we're going to do some awesome dynamic loaves. So that's part of 2015 is the bread line. We've had partnerships with local breweries making, people like coffee beers, and so we've partnered with 2 different breweries, Beyond the Pale and Bose, on coffee beers, and with Dominion Brewery on Earl Grey. They do an Earl Grey marmalade in their Belgian Saison. It's pretty good. In any case, we thought, gosh, we should really serve those. So liquor license is coming so that we can have some of the local craft beers here. We'll only serve from 4 to 10 p.m. We're committed to modest consumption, but that's going to occur here, but also at our Beechwood and Golden stores by next summer, which is fun, and we may expand it beyond that. And then we just try to get better and better all the time. So there'll be some of that.
That's cool. Yeah. And so looking back, that's a way. I think it's good. So looking back, like what does success mean to you? How do you continue to be successful, and how do you measure success personally for Bridgehead?
I think I love when I see customers enjoying their cup of coffee or meeting over coffee. And what do we mean as a meeting place? What is it when I see some of our team members high-fiving it or sharing a laugh? Jen Broad, you have an awesome laugh. That sense of kind of caring and community, that is a huge measure of success for me. Creating opportunities for young people to become coffee professionals is hugely inspiring for me. Watching the difference that it makes at Origin, like meeting a farmer who says, I'm going to send my kids to school, but my greatest hope is that they will continue to work my land and be coffee farmers too. That's huge, right, when you hear that from people. Or you meet a woman coffee farmer, and it's like, go girl. Those are all kind of measures of success that make me feel good.
any last or suggestions for?
Do I have last words? What's going to happen next?
No. Do you have any suggestions for aspiring entrepreneurs or people who are trying to build something, maybe not necessarily in the retail space, but just business in general? that you
Well,
could share?
I think one of the biggest things, is we like to think of ourselves as a demonstration business. We've written that into our articles. I like to think of myself as a social entrepreneur. But it takes having a good problem statement. What is the thing that you're trying to solve? Is there, you need to really think about that. And ideally, it's something that is on the positive side of the social balance sheet. I think that that's where more and more business success will come. Being disruptive is great. I don't know, our business is more of a traditional bricks and mortar. People think that it can be, but innovation can still happen there. But be thinking too about what's the end game for you. It's kind of important to look at, well, there's this great business idea and I really want to go for it. But one of the pieces of advice I'd give is be thoughtful around what is it that you want out of it too. Is it a lifestyle? Is it what is it that are your goals in it, and what is the right size for your business? A few years ago, KPMG sponsored me to go to Quantum Shift down at Ivy School in London, and I really was anxious about going because I thought, oh yeah, great, they're going to tell, the advice I'm going to get is, go get a bunch of financing and scale your pants off, right? And it wasn't like that at all. It was actually mostly focused on private company CEOs, and there was a huge message around what is right-sized. And there's a great book out there, Small is Beautiful. It's be thinking about what's right size.
And so I'm glad you brought up the social enterprise and your interest in that area. You can't hear me? And so I'm just wondering, are there any other business areas, markets, technologies? Do you think social enterprise is going to play a bigger role? Where do you see opportunities for entrepreneurs in the next couple of years? If somebody was to start right now.
It seems like the disruptive technologies are where it's at, for sure. Right. I took Uber here tonight. So.
How's that?
I knew he knew I wanted to say this. So, because one of the questions, he forwarded the questions earlier today, and one of them was, what apps do you use? And I'm like, holy crap, I hardly use any. I use my calendar. Does that count? Anyway, but I have to say, one of my favorite apps is Uber. Who's used Uber? Yeah, a lot of you guys. Isn't it cool? The app is killer. Had the cab companies developed an app like that, we'd still be taking the cabs and that'd be all fine. But what an awesome disruptive technology.
Mm-hmm. So you don't want to talk about the car you came in?
Oh yeah. So yeah. So I do my request pickup, and doop, in 9 minutes I'm going to be picked up, and it's no kidding in a Tesla. Cool. So I arrived by Tesla by Uber. Who knew?
Yeah, all electric. He's an awesome driver. I've got him.
He is an awesome driver. Yeah.
So you just mentioned a book, Small is Beautiful, but are there any other books that you're reading right now or apps that you use? I figured books, maybe.
The apps. Well, actually, there's a few books that I've read in the last year, and actually the one that I just finished was Dan Barber's The Third Plate. Anybody read that here? Oh, it's so good. So Dan Barber, it's memoirs on the future of food, and he just talks about organics, but beyond organics, it's just what is a healthy ecosystem for food production, and it's some beautiful case studies of the Dehesa in Spain and the Iberian pigs, and then there's another example from Spain with an old aqueduct system that has been converted to the most incredibly sustainable fish farm, but incredibly sustainable. Vera La Palma is the name of it. And then, has some beautiful work around the thing that's close to our hearts right now, which is grains and, what's happening. There's an amazing case study of Steve Jones, who works at the University of Washington and has 40,000 different varieties of wheat, that he's breeding. Because the whole thing is there was too much attention through the Green Revolution on developing food for yield that sacrifice flavor but also sacrifice the environment. And Dan Barber's profiles are, it doesn't need to be that way. So it's a hugely inspiring book, but that was good. Charles Montgomery, Happy City, was a great read. Michael Pollan, Cooked, so you could tell I'm kind of a food writer, love that kind of thing. Those are my top reads. Yep.
And
Top movie, Lunchbox.
awesome. I haven't heard about that one.
It's good.
It's good. Cool. How do you maintain focus as an entrepreneur? You guys have so much going on, all the time, different initiatives. How do you focus? How do you execute?
I'm looking over at Jen, our manager here, because she's not focused. No. You just sort of stay focused on there is different things going on, but you can't work sequentially. And as your business starts to get larger, you need to develop kind of consensus on what the big goals are and stay really focused on the big goals at any one time. But you also, as the leader, as your time gets more and more fragmented, and you just have to get more comfortable dealing with that, and that's okay.
So before I hand it over to the crowd for their questions for you, if you could have a superpower, what would it be, and why?
I forgot to prepare for this one. I'd always know what to say. I'd always know what the right thing to say was. How's that? No, just teasing. I wouldn't get tired.
Wouldn't get tired.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Okay, cool. Well, let's flip it over to you guys. You guys have some questions for Tracey about Bridgehead. Mike.
Well, Tracey, Steve Johnson, when he talks about where do good ideas come from in his book and his talks, one of the things he mentions is the importance of the slow hunch, the idea that there's no such thing as a eureka innovation.
Yes.
It takes a long time. I was wondering if maybe you could share some of your history of ups and downs in your journey.
Sure. So for those at the back, the reference was to Steve Johnson, who says there's a slow hunch, not necessarily a eureka moment, and what have the ups and downs been? There's definitely been some ups and downs. But on the slow hunch side, it's interesting to think about the journey to get here. In 1987, I took a backpacking trip to Nicaragua for 2 months. Came back and started volunteering with Bridgehead, only, moved on to something else, and then came back and had met coffee farmers, right? So somewhere that was kind of planted, right, in the back. So, and then, the time in Bangladesh and that sort of plants, and then working for a consumer co-op. Like, in a way, it felt like there were lots of experiences that led me to wanting to do this. So yes, I definitely think things percolate and we don't realize on an unconscious level, and then comes together. In terms of some ups and downs, there's just recently a downer was we competed for the space at 90 Elgin, Public Works Building, Treasury Board, 2,000 people above you. It's going to be a rockin' store. Oh, great, we're going to get it, and you don't get it. You lose out to Tim Hortons, right? And then you get social media like, why the hell aren't you in there? And you. Those are the downs, right? Sometimes you compete on locations and you're not successful. Sometimes you try things. We tried open-faced Danish-style sandwiches when we first opened the roastery here, and we all thought they were great. Customers didn't, so we had to retire those. And so you have ups and downs around that. Sometimes you get a punch in the nose in terms of legislation, right? It's like in the last year, and it's frustrating because our industry is an industry. My frontline guys, right? we would love to pay more, but there are certain constraints, that we run into in terms of, how much are people really going to be willing to pay for a cup of coffee? How, that those are sort of ups and downs, and they're sort of hard to deal with sometimes. Capital constraints, and, when it took us till our 8th location before we could stop, move on to a term lending program with one of the big banks and not have to set up a separate numbered company and use an SBL. Right? Took 8 locations of track record before we could do that. So that was kind of a bummer. So, there's been different things along the way. Coffee prices, currency, and what happens with that. It's lots of stuff. Always.
Yes, right here.
Hi. A couple of questions, actually. You talked about financing, and it'd be interesting to hear your experience is different, if you have any.
But on the financing piece, I mean, it's we've done a lot of growth. I would look at our auditors here and say we've performed miracles, really, with a relatively small amount of capital and always being pressured with our cash position in particular, because we've just reinvested, and and so that's kind of challenging. But on the and it's not, we're not an asset-backed business, right? And so any of you, in software, what have you, you're going to get some investment because they think there's going to be a hockey stick or there's an acquisition, that you're working towards, right? Like that's the normal course in those kinds of businesses. And you want to be measured for top-line revenue, right, or the innovation and the IP that you're building in your company, but in a business like ours, you're measured somewhat on top line revenue, but you're really measured on profitability, and anyway, there is a challenge that comes to that. But in terms of financing, we started off with a friends and family round. We had a bunch of small shareholders. We were initially very aligned, but there wasn't an exit strategy for them when they signed on, and we did eventually have to create one because we became misaligned over time. I wanted to keep growing the business. They were wanting to, hey, I want to see a return on my original investment, or I'd like to stay in and just see dividends, which means we would stop growing. And so, we lost shareholder alignment. And in fact, recognizing that and doing something about it is really important. And in hindsight, Kickstarter and Indiegogo were not around, but those probably would have been the right way for us to have started our business if we were starting today. But making sure you have really good shareholder alignment is super, super important. And, always use the friendly money first, right? Is also another good thing. And growth, we plan on doing. Small is beautiful, but finding your efficiencies is important too. Right now, we're in no man's land in coffee world. Like usually it's onesie, twosies, sometimes 3Z, 4Zs, but it's very rare that you'll find a small chain of our size. And, it's an interesting sort of place to be. We have to figure out what to do next. But our thought is that, we have created a central hub here between our kitchen and our roastery, which makes us more efficient than most. And it also gives us the ability to be innovative. And, that's the model that we think will work for growth. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
Tracey, how do you go about selecting new suppliers?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we don't do, like we have probably 6 different insurance brokers call us up each year. Are you going to put that out to tender? Are you going to put it out to tender? And we don't do that often. It's a pain in the butt to kind of get ready for it and to bring that in, and then what is the savings? So sometimes so we don't do things in sort of the normal way on kind of the standard day-to-day stuff. In the early days, we actually purchased all of our cups in. We made a selection based on what had the least environmental footprint. and we used to do our own distribution of our cups across our shops, pain in the butt. And then, several years ago, we made a partnership with Snelling, which is a local paper cleaning company. They're a fantastic company. They've been a fantastic partner of ours. But we said we need full transparency in our partnership, and we want to go to a cost plus. And we've had, fantastic relationship. And so we tend to find partners that we want to be with longer term, and there's a mutual benefit. So something like the Snelling, where they handle all of that. Summerlee Dairy, who, provide us with the Lanctainshire brand of organic milk, and who also do work with Brum's Dairy to bring us the cream in large bladders. That's a great partner that we've sort of cultivated and worked with over time. We have several local farmers that we work with, Dan O'Brien on the meat side, Brian Jess on the green side. It's balancing their ability to supply. Sometimes we're too big now for a lot of the local farmers. We're just too big. And, it's like, they're like, whoa, you need how many carrots? Like, whoa, but there are, there's some that really make sense to work with. But I know I'm not really answering your question very clearly, but it's often like-minded values and partners and wanting to grow together is how we deal with it. Although, as a counterpoint to that, we've also disintermediated, it's another new word, like pivot, several suppliers over time, and we try to be really upfront about that. So an example right now is we partnered with Urban Juice Press, which is a brand new startup doing raw, non-pasteurized organic juices, because we wanted to test. But I sort of said to them, guys, there's a very good chance we're going to take this in-house, so we're going to do a 2-month trial. You need to know, whether you're comfortable just having exposure in our shops for 2 months. And they're like, yep, we'll sign up for that. So we try to be very transparent, about stuff when we do it. That's a good question. We source from a lot of different places, but most of our coffees are coming from Central and South America, and that's a bit of a commitment around how that's closer than Indonesian coffees or African coffees, but we certainly also bring in Sumatran coffee, and we bring in Ethiopian coffees from Africa, but most of them are Centrals and South, and that's the travel distance is less, so. But southern and northern hemisphere is sort of how we deal with it, seasonal. Hi. Hey. Well, if you're bleeding money, you definitely should give it up. No. Yeah, sometimes that's... One of the goals that we set now in terms of our kitchen stuff is that, a product has to... Definitely the total cost with labor and food needs to be cheaper than what we could get it outside in the market for in order to make sense having that product, because otherwise we should just partner and bring in somebody else's product. So that one's kind of obvious. So sometimes, like for instance, tarts, we thought we'd want to do a small range of tarts. We're just not selling enough of them. And for the labor that it takes to do them, we're going to have to kill the tarts. And I am so sad, and it's such a simple thing, right? But I'm really sad about it. But it's just not working, right? So we have to do it. So sometimes it's financial. Sometimes, years ago, we put panini grills into a couple of the stores, and we did these grilled panini sandwiches. But the smell, it was like all you could smell was olive oil. And it was like, we can't keep doing that. Like, and even the flatbreads, I get concerned that it takes away from the coffee smell. So that was a case where it was super successful, but it wasn't on brand, right? So it's different things at different times, and it's just judgment. Yep. But the raw juice thing, it's so on brand. Yeah.
Where are the tarts going?
I stock up.
January 6th. Yeah. You're one of the 3 people. Glad to meet you. No. Yeah.
Anybody else have a question for Tracey? No. Mike?
Just building on that question about your brand,
So we did have a failed store in Montreal. We had Mountain Equipment Co-op when they opened their Montreal store. said, "Hey, come on and be in store with us." And it was beautiful store. It wasn't in store. It was like beside them. They built it, and this is back in 2003. And we had only 3 stores here, and we just opened our central kitchen. So it was not. We were not very stable to take that on, but it was one of those situations where I didn't like the location. And for those of you that have been to that Mountain Equipment Co-op store in Montreal, it's in Marché Central, which is a discount-oriented power retail center that's where the 40 meets the 15, and it's all surrounded by industrial park. And it was, normally MEC, traditional main streets, urban areas, pedestrian-oriented, near waterways, right? But they broke their mold, probably against their better judgment. And then I broke, our normal, because I thought, wow, we couldn't ask for a better partner. Wow, we could go everywhere with them, right? Those are the things you think as a young entrepreneur. But in fact, we call that the store that didn't succeed but didn't fail either, because we got this great conversion rate. 9% of the visitors to the MEC were coming into the shop. That compares with 2% that go to the second cups in the Home Depots, as an example. But they were so far below their worst case projections, and we were bleeding, and we pivoted as soon as we could, and we did a midnight run and got everything out of there and stopped paying rent. That's what you do. That's what you do. And then the onus is on them to get somebody else in there. Then you pay them the check for those months in between. That's how you do it. You heard it from me. And you keep it friendly. And I still remember Peter Robinson, the CEO of MEC at the time. He phoned me up and he said, "Thanks for keeping me out of that one, and thanks for sending the check." So, anyway.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Feel free. No? Okay, cool. Well,
thank you.
Please give a huge round of applause to Tracey.
Thanks, Franco.
Not only for speaking, but for having us here. It was awesome.
Thanks for coming here.
All the furniture around, I really
all
appreciate
good.
it. It's amazing. Cool. So I just want to thank you guys again for coming out, and some of you for standing. I know not everyone has a standing desk, so maybe you're not used to standing. It is better. I just wanted to let you guys know the next Startup Grind Ottawa is on February 26th with Dax De Silva. He's the CEO of Lightspeed. They just raised $35 million. It's a point of sale. That one will be at Microsoft, so you will be sitting. The next Sales Professionals Ottawa, which some of you may know Glenn, he runs that, is December 10th, a Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Just Google it, you'll find his website. And I also want to let you know that Startup Ottawa is having a Christmas party on December 12th at Fat Boys. So if you guys want to hang out with other startups, have some almost all-you-can-eat barbecue. I forget whether he said it was going to be all-you-can-eat or not, so that's why I threw in almost at the last, just in case. I forget. But startupottawa.ca, you can find your thing there, just in case. Don't tell him I said that. Thanks so much again to Tracey and Bridgehead for hosting us. The food was fantastic. There are more treats back there, I think. Finish it up. Thank you.